describing some of the gang rape by government officials that was occurring against me at the Bechtolds' house. And they were hosting this event at their own house and practicing and allowing a large number of individuals, adults, to practice their nonverbal, often nonverbal instructions to me to give them blowjobs or do sexual things for them, or else they would torture me or do worse things to me, like deprive me of food and that kind of thing. And then at one point, I might be in there for hours and hours, and then all of a sudden Janet would come in, open the door, and she would come into the room with a plate of food. I'm still tied up to the chair. Okay, and let me tell you what her occupation is. Okay, because she was working for the school system in some capacity at that time, with gifted kids, and I guess that includes sexual gifts, doesn't it? And then she went back to school, like a decade later, when a couple of her kids were in college too, and went back and got her master's so that she could get a raise and get better pay at her school department job. Okay, so these are the kinds of people that had constant contact with kids. And it's pretty strange that they're the ones who've always had work and been employed and been working with even kids and employed and that kind of thing. And nobody ever goes knocking on their door from CPS or some sort of child, daycare licensing group about, any kind of investigation. So then, so she would come in with a plate of food, and I would then eat. And occasionally they'd have Nathan, their older son, go in with a plate of food, and I would eat. They'd untie my hands so that I could eat this plate of food. And, this is just completely crazy, obviously. And at night, they were doing this tying me up all day, and I was forced to be in the same spot. But at nighttime, like when it was dark and everything, they had me sleeping in a bed, and I was pretty much led out, and then given some kind of a tranquilizer. And sometimes they electrocuted me first with the electrocution box, and then basically I was in this weakened state, and I pretty much passed out on this bed. I don't know whose bed it was, but typically it was in another bedroom. Like they had a guest room maybe, or maybe one of their kids was visiting some other family somewhere. So I was put in their bed, but at nighttime I was not sleeping in George and Janet's larger bed in that same room. And okay, so I don't completely remember just right off the top of my head if this other thing that they did to me was right around the time of all of this rape of me while I was tied to a chair with all the government men. But I know I was being tied to a chair, so it could have been that this was before a big series of, like, the big gang rape happened, and it could have been that they were just at that point testing my responses to all their triggers and everything with just a few individuals. But then at one point, they started doing what looked to me like rape of one of the Dixies. And they were having this one blonde woman was going into the bedroom, and well, sometimes Janet Bechtold and one of the Dixies were then sitting on top of the bed, like I would be in the chair. Let me just draw this out really fast because I just show you a quick idea of what I'm talking about. Okay. Well, for example, this is like that would be the doorway. Let's say that's the room. This would be the doorway. Here I would be in a chair at the opposite wall against the door. And then let's say, and then the bed was right over here. It's very. It wasn't a huge room, but so this bed was sort of close to this chair that I was tied up to. And then Janet and one of the Dixies would get on this bed, would be sitting on the bed, and they would start French kissing. And you know, it should be like no big deal. Like, how sad for me to be talking about it. But the reason I bring it up is because what it started to look like was that that maybe this one Dixie was not willingly participating in that at all. And it's possible that one of them had cocaine. Because occasionally they were showing me stuff, and I did see some drugs, but I mean, like, they had DEA and they had people there that were an FBI that were fully involved in all the drugs. They weren't like, you know, they pretended like they were doing the opposite thing. And it wasn't like they were quote unquote corrupt, bad. This was not like a group of the bad government people who are working their own little ideas out underneath the government radar. This is like a government approved kind of a conspiracy against me, and you know, maybe a few other people that they were raping or stealing from and trying to control. But you know, when I say it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm I'm exposing some people that were, you know, abusing their government jobs. That's not what it was. This was like government sanctioned. And some of those individuals that I mentioned coming in for the blowjobs and all of that were also coming in as senior officials in the highest positions from the Pentagon. And there were several Pentagon officials that showed up. One was Karl Rove. Like, they were seriously higher ranking members of these different intelligence groups. A couple of them were also like doctors. So for example, even Adams, or like Peters, Alicia Peters' parents, I think they were FBI. Not completely sure, but they were some government. And then the Adams, he was some kind of a psychologist. But anyway, so they would start making out in front of me, and then they would like French kissing and everything. And And then they started doing, there was this blonde woman that went in, and she started ordering them around about what they were supposed to do. So she went to the side of the bed, and specifically, I remember exactly where she was. She was like, I was sitting like here. Let's see, sitting there, and then she was over here. So I was sitting here. She came in, went around to this side of the bed, and started directing Janet and one of the Dixies on how she wanted them to French kiss and make out more, do different things in front of me. So I'm here tied up at this chair, and I'm watching what they're doing. And then then she wanted them to do oral sex to each other. So they were doing vaginal oral sex, like lesbian sex with their tongues. I couldn't really see everything, so I'm not completely sure if they really did that, but it looked like it, from the bed. And this woman that was ordering this was pretty mean. She wasn't a nice person. And then they ordered, one of these Dixies, they told me to get on the bed. They had me lying down on the bed, and they said, now isn't this better? And they forced me to have my pants off and my legs spread, and then they forced this Dixie to do oral sex on me, on Janet and George Bechtol's bed. So here I'm thinking, this is my own mom, and then behind this scene of what was happening, this man who looked like a Rasmussen FBI person, and a woman who was a Mormon were, and then I think another woman who wasn't a Mormon, but they were videotaping it with like holding up this handheld videotape machine, and they were taping this scene of my mother basically raping me. And I think, telling this Dixie to do something like that and then videotaping it just looks sort of suspicious, like they wanted some kind of dirt on a Dixie so that they could say, okay, in the future when we want you to say your daughter's mentally ill, this is what you're going to say. You're going to say your daughter's mentally ill. Or we're going to expose you for pedophilia, but you'll never get us. That kind of thing. And they were doing this sort of thing with blackmail all the time. But that's what they did to me. And they had Janet Bechtold doing oral sex to me too. Janet Bechtold actually did a lot of oral sex on me. And I remember just kind of being confused because I was thinking, I thought men and women kissed each other and had sex or whatever, and I was kind of confused about all this other stuff they were doing. Well, Janet also had some lesbian friends who she invited over, and they had lesbians over there too. I mean, like real lesbians who were not just doing this for some kind of a government thing. And then they were saying things like, now isn't this better? Doesn't hurt you, and do you like this more than what these men are doing? They wanted me to be like a bisexual person, and I wasn't. But that's what they were doing, and they were degrading more than one person in the process. And it was not ever consensual. Even at my young age, it wasn't consensual. They would give me, and then after they would do that, they would give me a sedative, and sometimes before, because I would start freaking out, start screaming. So they'd give me this sedative, and I'd be like half out of it, and they would do this to me.